Hello, Audioholics. This is Logan, and welcome to The Wrong Opinion. Today, Tyler and I, say hi, Tyler,
Hello, Tyler.
are going to be doing the wrong opinion on
System of a Down.
System of a Down.
Now, can I just say that, fuck the system.
Fuck
Just want
the
to say fuck the
system.
system.
What does System of a Down even mean? I'm now realizing that name makes no sense.
I mean, half of the shit they've made makes no sense, so,
Fair enough.
I mean, the first album has a song with lyrics that go, "The kombucha mushroom people sit around all day."
Fair enough.
Who the fuck are the kombucha mushroom people?
I don't know, but I wouldn't want one of them swimming up my ass.
They probably own the System of a Down.
Fair enough. All
Yeah,
right.
so we're doing System of a Down. There really aren't many albums with System of a Down, which is kind of like a big reason we chose this band. I think this is a band both Logan and I both have a lot of nostalgia for, and a band that both of us really like a lot, but we haven't actually listened to all of their albums yet, so it was kind of convenient to choose this one for that reason.
Yeah.
And again, not many albums, so.
Yeah. And also that means not many bad albums. There are definitely some debate on if there are any bad albums, but we'll get to that later. So did you want to go with
I said I would say that there aren't any straight up bad System records, but there are, I'd say, for me, there's one that I think is subpar. He thinks there's two that's subpar.
Okay.
Put it that way.
I wouldn't say, I don't know. We'll get to that. So the first one, System of a Down. We'll start with you. Yeah.
All right, so for me, I put this in the B tier. It's going to be the only album in the B tier for me. This used to be my favorite System record for a while, just because I loved how heavy it is. I would say it's probably their heaviest record, almost hands down. I mean, not to say the other albums aren't heavy. You know, Toxicity and Mesmerize and Hypnotize all have extremely, extremely heavy moments. But just overall as a giant package, I'd say their first record was their heaviest. And not only that, but it's also potentially the most insane album they ever made. You can really just smell the drugs with this one. You can almost get high off of the cocaine they were probably high off of when they made this record.
It's like a groovy cocaine.
It's just seeping with it. It's seeping with it. But just because of that, it is kind of its own beast. Unlike the rest of their discography, this is pretty much the only album that's anything like it. And it has some of my favorite System of a Down songs on it. Sweet Pea, which is a great opener, still one of my favorite System of a Down songs. Oh, and we saw it live, and it was amazing.
Yes.
The song No, Sugar, of course, which I referenced earlier with the kombucha mushroom people. Yes. That's just maybe their most insane song of all time is that one.
I mean, that's a pretty tall order, though. I mean, they have a lot of pretty insane...
My cock is bigger than yours. Also on this album, you have Spiders and you have War? Yeah, so those are the highlights for me. The rest of the album, though, I realized listening the past, so I listened to all of these albums at least twice for this video, and with this one I realized that there's a lot more mess songs on it than I remembered. Quite a few. I wouldn't say there's anything that's actually bad or even mediocre, but there's just songs that aren't as good as the other ones. The album is chock full of awesome instrumentation, and I mean, it's System of a Down, so you can expect insane vocals. This is a very raw record. As a result of that, it kind of works for it, but also against it too. When you have a debut album, you don't want it to sound like a debut album, because if it sounds like a debut album, then it comes across as amateurish, and maybe you're wearing your influences too much on your sleeve, whatever the case may be.
I think can you really like what influences can you
Sounds
really
like a
see
debut
in
album.
this album?
It doesn't sound like they really found their thing.
I guess, but like I wouldn't even know I would say definitely in the later albums there's a heavy Dead Kennedys influence, but I
Yeah,
don't know.
I mean that's just true of the band in general, I think.
Yeah.
But this album also, like, it is political. It's highly political,
Yeah.
but I would say it's less political in a lot of ways than every other album they've made following it. But yeah, overall, I would say it's a fantastic debut album, but it has some weaker elements that keep it away from being any higher than a B. That's my opinion.
So I don't really have anything to add to that, but I will give it an A. For basically the same reasons, but I think that the good songs are good enough to where it at least deserves a 9 out of 10. Porthole is another song that you didn't even mention that I think is kind of a standout. I would say all the songs are good, but generally speaking, I think the latter half is a little bit weaker. Um,
Yeah, that's true. This album's a little front ended.
yeah, I mean, it's just as diverse as the later album. In fact, arguably more diverse, just musically and in terms of influence. I can't really think of an like he said, it's like a beast all its own. I've never, let alone another System of a Down record, I don't think I've ever heard another album like this.
The album art blows, though. It's
Yeah.
just a hand. Like, what the
I mean, I don't know. Does System of a Down really have like that good of album? I mean, like Toxicity is pretty cool. Like the System of a Down
I
is like
mean,
the
it's just
Hollywood
like
sign,
a
but
Hollywood thing. I think Mesmerize and Hypnotize have really cool album art.
yeah, I guess out of the System albums, that's probably the best. But yeah, very raw, very high energy, heavy as fuck. I don't really have much to add, but yeah, it's an A for me. So move on to Toxicity.
Toxicity. Now, this is a just complete front to back improvement from their first record, and this is an S rank for me. You know, everything from the vocals, the instrumentation, the songwriting, everything. It's more technical, it's more polished. There's nothing that is worse about this album compared to the first one. And I would say that this is the first truly amazing album in System of a Down's discography, and the first that I would consider a masterpiece. Now, this is not my favorite System of a Down album, but if we were talking what album is objectively the best, it'd probably be this one. You know, you have some absolutely amazing standout songs. Prison Song, Deer Dance, the title track. It's an immortal song. You're going to be listening to that song in 30 years. Chop Suey,
Abel,
Aerials, Bounce, ATWA, Psycho. I mean, you can pretty much just read down the track listing. Aside from a few filler tracks, this album, front to back, is just killer. As I said, amazing, technical, brilliant instrumentation, insane vocal performances. The only flaw is that there is a few filler tracks. And due to that, it's not my personal favorite, but there is no arguing the sheer quality of this release.
guys, I'm gonna just go on a bit of a rant about this album because I fucking love it. Yeah, so S rank for me, definitely. But I have so much nostalgia for this album, despite the fact that I wasn't even allowed to listen to it for like most of my life. Prison Song, you know, funny thing, when I was a little kid, I my brother had like a mix CD, and on that mix CD were like were two songs, Prison Song. Well, there was a bunch of songs, but Prison Song and I believe it was Believed by Disturbed, right? Something like that. I think it was Believed by Disturbed, or like the first song on that album. Um, I was not allowed to listen to Prison Song because, I mean, they have the line, I smacked my bitch right here in Hollywood. And my brother was able to convince my 4 or 5 year old self that Believe was the exact same song as Prison Song by System of a Down, just without cursing. Psycho, I listened to that when I was like 5 years old as well, and I had no idea what the hell a psycho groupie cocaine crazy was. And to be honest, I still don't, but I I would like I would like just yell that, and like I'm so glad like my parents would have kicked my ass, I think, if they knew that I was doing that. But yeah, just overall like Prison Song again. Deer Dance probably has one of my favorite lyrics, just in general. We can't afford to be neutral on a moving train. Just so amazing. Um, what else was on there? Yeah, Toxicity, Chop Suey, Jet Pilot, Bounce, um,
I always thought
Aerials.
Jet Pilot was hilarious.
Yeah. Did you mention Aerials? That's an amazing song.
I did. Aerials is one of my favorite System of a Down.
Yeah, exactly. Science, that's a good song. The only two songs I can think of that I didn't really like are X, and let me see if I can find the name of the one. It's at the very end of the album. It is. Oh, yeah, Arta. I don't really like that one. But yeah, beyond that, I mean, Shimmy is pretty fun. Forest is a great song. Needles, just amazing album. I can, and not only when I was a little kid, when I was in high school and I was actually finally allowed to listen to this kind of music without parent supervision, I played the hell out of Toxicity mostly. This is the album I have the biggest personal connection with. I listened to this on my iPad with my headphones plugged in during study hall when we were supposed to be, studying. And I cannot say enough good about this album. All right. So let's talk about an album that's probably not quite as good.
That's putting it a bit lightly. So next we have Steal This Album, which I'm sure people did, and I'm sure they just put it right back where they found it because this album is highly mediocre. It's not bad or anything per se. It's just not particularly good. There's about 2 good songs on it, and one of them I always forget exists. The rest of it I find completely unmemorable and a waste of time to listen to when you have 4 other albums. Even their weakest songs are better than anything here. It's really just a meh album. It's weird that this is there. So System of a Down only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 albums, and one of them is the only one that you could even argue is mediocre. Like you might have preferences, but nobody's going to listen to Hypnotize and say, "Oh yeah, this is a mediocre album." But I'm not the only one who says that about Steal This Album. It's pretty much universally considered their worst record. I don't know what they were thinking with this. There's a metric shit ton of experiments they pull on this record. I don't know. Maybe they were just getting sick of, the way that they were doing the last 2 records. But a lot of it doesn't work. Nothing here truly offends me or anything. Like I said, it's not bad per se, but there is absolutely nothing that stands out. The only 2 good songs are IEAI, AIO, and Mr. Jack, and even those 2 songs are just the shiniest of the turds. Uh, it sucks that those songs are on such a subpar album. I think, like, if you had stuck them on maybe the debut, or even you could have pulled like X or Shimmy off of Toxicity. They would have fit in there, but they would have been one of the weaker songs on those albums.
So
So yeah,
what are you ranking it?
D. Thought you knew that already. I told him that before the show.
Yeah, you told me that before the show, but
Yeah, it's a D album for me. If I were to give this a ranking out of 10, it would be a 6, just a straight 6.
okay.
And the only reason it's not average is because of IEAIO and Mr. Jack.
All right. So I feel about the same, but I'm gonna be quite a bit nicer, I think, and give it a B. I think there are more songs than those. Like you said, IEIO, Mr. Jack, ADD. How can you not mention American Dream Disorder? That's an amazing song.
Yeah,
Uh, one of their most popular ones. Bubbles, Fuck the System is on this album.
yeah.
Rain,
It's a funny name. The song itself is just eh.
Streamline is good. Just Chicken Stew is a good song. I would say generally though, this is a band. This is the sign of a band that is creatively bankrupt. I think that they didn't really have a lot of idea. They had musical ideas, but I don't think they had like fully formed ideas yet. I mean, this is definitely their weakest album. I would not call it bad though. I would still say I recommend it. I think there's a lot of quality deep tracks if you are a true fan or if you're a fan and you might have overlooked it. Definitely not the first one to start with though. I would say
Oh no.
like quite
That,
literally
that has the
anything
potential
else
to just
above
turn
it.
you off of the band completely, I think.
Yeah, spoiler alert, the other two albums are above this. Both of our lists. But I don't know. Just I would say like the only two real positives I would give this album is it is mixed a lot better, I think, than the first two albums and even the later two ones. I think it
Oh, I
just has
forgot
a
to mention that. The
yeah.
production, in my opinion, is one of the worst aspects of the album. It's too clean.
Yeah, but I kind of like that. I kind of like that. Like I like personally I like clean production. I don't cuz like a lot of albums around this time they were like really distorted the loudness wars, right? It's a real thing. They distorted the music, they made it sound really harsh, they made it sound really dirty, and I guess that has its own appeal. I will always favor cleaner production over dirtier production. Unless it's like as long as the clean production still maintains a decent amount of edge. And I think that this does. Um, I'd say despite not really having a lot of ideas musically or thematically, they had a lot of ideas musically. I think that they had a lot of like this. How do I put this? They used like some unique instruments. They had like some unique sounding songs, but like he said, a lot of the songs on this album kind of just go in one ear and out the other. Apart from the ones that I mentioned and the ones that he mentioned as well. So yeah, bottom line, it's a B. Listen to it. If you're already a fan of System of a Down and you want to hear some lesser known tracks that are pretty good, surrounded by quite a bit of filler, I highly recommend, or I don't know if I'd say highly, but I recommend Steal this album.
All right, so now we're on to Mesmerize. Now, I kind of debated a lot whether or not I wanted to put this above Toxicity or not. You're gonna have to wait until the end of my spiel about the album to learn where I did eventually place it. But I'll say right up front, this album front to back is fantastic, and this is, in my opinion, the second masterpiece in this discography. BYOB, Revenga, I have no fucking idea. Cigarro, Radio Video, Violent Pornography, Sad Statue, Old School Hollywood and Lost in Hollywood are amazing songs. Question, This Cocaine Makes Me Feel Like I'm on This Song is fantastic as well. Oh yeah, that's the whole album. Every song is amazing. And I think that is an achievement for a band like System of a Down, because I feel like over their discography, their biggest flaw as a band is I think they try to cram too much in every album. This is one that doesn't feel like that. Whereas Toxicity did a little bit, so I'm going to put this above Toxicity. For the sole reason that Toxicity has a little bit of filler. It feels like they tried to cram a lot in that album, and Mesmerize is more polished. It's more refined. I think that the lyrics are more thought-provoking than Toxicity's lyrics. I mean, not to say Toxicity's lyrics weren't thought-provoking or that they were bad or anything like that. They were amazing. I just think Mesmerize has better lyrics overall. So yeah, that's what I have to say about Mesmerize.
Okay, yeah, so definitely it goes above. I had a lot of nostalgia for this album as well, specifically BYOB, but
Yeah.
I actually didn't listen to this album until quite a bit later. I think I was actually still friends with Tyler when I did.
Yeah.
It was maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. I actually sat my ass down and listened to this full album, and it. I'm actually going to go a step further than Tyler and say that this is one of the best protest albums of all time. And the only track that I think is anything short of a 10 out of 10 is maybe Questions. I didn't really care as much for that one, but even that is still like an 8 or a 9 out of 10. It's still a great song. I really don't have much to say that he didn't say. Violent Pornography, despite all of the songs being really good, I'd say Violent Pornography is my favorite. Lyrically, thematically, just really good. BYOB, again, another one of those songs I was never allowed to listen to, and when I finally got older and I was able to listen to it, it just, made it feel that much more special to me, I guess. Yeah, nothing more to say other than listen to Tyler and I. This is a fantastic fucking album. Go to the party, have a real good time with this fucking thing.
All right, and that brings us to the last as of 2020 album in System of a Down's discography.
They aren't doing it anymore anytime
Hypnotize.
soon.
What'd you say?
They aren't doing it anymore anytime soon.
Yeah. I think there is a fair possibility that this album will end up being just their last ever, which is really unfortunate, but, it is the situation of the band. So, okay, once again, I'll just say up front, every single positive thing I said about Mesmerize applies on this album too. However, I think this album is different in that I know these albums were both recorded at the exact same time, but I think the subject matter and feel of the albums are very different. I think that Hypnotize is the darkest album that System of a Down ever made. Maybe not. Like, you have to understand System of a Down's lyrics and subject matter were always heavy. They just didn't always feel heavy, because they constantly throw humor in and they're doing, like, eccentric things. And not to say that doesn't happen on this album, It's just that the music, the way that it feels, the way that it's composed, it feels heavier. Um, there is a slight decrease in that humor in this album. That's not to say it's completely gone. You have a song like Kill Rock and Roll, which, if you didn't know, is just about like a rabbit that Darren ran over one day on his way to the studio. And he named it Rock and Roll because fuck you, that's why. And Vicinity of Obscenity is just fucking hilarious. That song is about, I assume, sexual fetishes, since there's like 4 or 5 lyrics about feet and things of that nature. So it's not that the album doesn't have any humor. It doesn't take itself deathly seriously or anything, but it is more serious than their other work. And I think I personally like that. I personally like that more mature feel. Now let's talk about the actual songs. You got Attack, Dreaming, Title Track, Tentative, which is one of my new favorite System of a Down songs. U-Fig, Holy Mountain, Soldier Side, Lonely Day. Just like Mesmerized, every song on this album is amazing. She's Like Heroin is the only one I didn't mention yet, and that one is also really good because it kind of compares like drug addiction to prostitution, which is an interesting point. I think that this is System of a Down's most refined and masterful album, and if time does indeed prove that it will be their last, they certainly went out with a bang. This is my favorite System of a Down album in the S rank. Now, that's probably very controversial to some people, but really what it came down to is both of these albums, I would say objectively, are equally as good, you know, for different reasons. You know, Hypnotize is a different beast from Mesmerize, but they both have a similar sound. They're both really heavy. I think what it comes down to is I just listen to Hypnotize more, you know? When I was doing this video, I listened to Hypnotize 4 times. I only had to listen to it twice. I listened to it the 2 other times because I wanted to. And I didn't do that with any other album on this list. So that's why it has to top mine, just based on preference.
So we're gonna disagree, I think, a little bit.
Just a wee bit.
So here's my stance. This is an A rank album, not to say it's bad. I just think there's not a single song that I would call bad on this album. I think some songs are just good to mediocre. Tentative actually being one of them, in my opinion. I think that the riff for that song and the feel of that song especially sounds like what would happen if you got one of those AI programs that write songs, if they wrote a System of a Down riff and System of a Down lyrics. Yeah, it's very meaningful, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it is as memorable thematically as anything off of Mesmerize or even Toxicity. I think I'm sort of mixed on the idea of this being, because I always am, whenever they have the choice of releasing a double album or releasing 2 albums in the same amount of time. Because on one hand, it reeks of we want more money, so we're going to, you know, that might not have been System of a Down's choice necessarily. It could have just been like the record label's choice. I don't really entirely know. But if that was the case, then that kind of screams of the record label wanting more money, so they split the album up into 2. But at the same time, a double album can lose steam really quickly. And if this was the White Album, this would be the second disc with songs like Sexy Sadie and Revolution 9 and Cry Baby Cry and all of the lesser known songs. And there's still, there's still like the Helter Skelter. There's, there's good songs on it, don't get me wrong, but it's not as strong as, say, the first record. There are some good songs. Lonely Day, Euphig, Holy Mountain, that one's my favorite. Soldier Side, and Attack. I think those are my favorites. Everything else I think is good to mediocre. Um, I'd say a lot of good songs overall, but just kind of commits the cardinal sin of the second half of a double album usually being weaker than the first. And that's true of a lot of double, not all of them. Not all of them. There's a couple double albums I can say without a shadow of a doubt are just as good on the second half as on the first. But this one, if we are calling it a double album, the second half is not nearly as good. Still very good, though. It's a 9 out of 10. That's almost perfect. I just wish it was more captivating the whole way through. So that's my entire list. Do you have any finishing thoughts?
The only thing I would say is that look, you have like a B tier, a D tier, and then 3 S's.
Yeah.
That is just the most System of a Down thing that I've ever seen.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this was a really fun one to do. I'm glad we did it. I think that going forward, I'm going to listen to these albums a lot more than I did before. So I think this has actually made me a bigger fan of System of a Down than I actually was before. Weirdly enough. What about you?
I would say definitely. Especially the first album. I don't think I would have listened to that, or I probably would have at some point, but I hadn't listened to the first album. I hadn't listened to the first album, I hadn't listened to Steal This Album, and I hadn't listened to Hypnotize before doing this video. And I can definitely say there's great songs on all 3 of those albums. But, I think that I already had kind of an introduction to System of a Down as a whole. And I think that the top 2 albums for me, Toxicity and Mesmerize, are the 2 albums that I have the most nostalgia for. And just happen to be the 2 albums I own on vinyl. But, all right. So, I mean, like, and for the most part, Tyler and I kind of agree. I mean, like, if you take, like, ranking out of play here, for the most part, apart from Hypnotize, we have them in the same order of like which one's the best and which one's the worst. So would you like to count down your list one more time?
All right, so start from the bottom and go to the top this time. So at the bottom of my list in the D tier is Steal This Album. And then we have the debut album, System of a Down, in B tier. And then we have the 3 masterpieces in S tier, Toxicity, Mesmerize, and Hypnotize. In that order.
All right. So we have Steal This Album as a B. We have System of a Down, the debut, which is A. And then also in A, we have Hypnotize. And then the 2 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, the other 2 were wired to a jet pilot and smiled when it flew over to me. Toxicity and Mesmerize.
Yeah, so that's been our ranking of System of a Down. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope to see you guys in our next video, The Wrong Opinion on Symphony X. I'm really excited for that.
All right. And just remember, kids, we can't afford to be neutral on a moving train. Bye-bye.